There was such a
The big,
proud
big
moment
heist.
of like,
That's
yeah, there was such a
amazing.
proud moment of not realizing how they'd done it. Like they still don't know how we did it.
So continuing the BFI Flare Film Festival coverage, and P.S. Burn This Letter Please, directed by Michael Seligman.
Yeah, so, oh my gosh, where to start with this film? It's kind of about a box of letters that have been held secret for decades. I think it's like 50 or 60 years. And it basically is like an unboxing of these letters and the stories that surround them around, I guess, 1950s, the drag scene in the 1950s in New York. And it's a real window into language and the culture and what it meant to be queer in New York in the 50s. And it's all documented through this set of letters that are narrated over the documentary.
There's something really powerful about that in itself. I think rich and vivid memories obviously is one thing that's going to come out of this, but also the strong emotions that come with that too. And there are a lot of those in this, because obviously it's a lot of memories for these people that are in this, talking about their memories that they have. But I think there's a real art form as well in voiceover, and the voiceovers that they use for these are brilliant. They really tell a story, and it's a really, really vivid story.
You know how RuPaul always says, oh, you need to know your herstory and you know how everything started. I actually had zero clue that there was even a drag scene in the 50s. I mean, when I think of like America in the 50s, I think of like the white picket fences and, you know, that sort of thing. And I really don't think of New York, because I thought the drag scene was born out of the ballroom scene in the 80s. So the fact that they were talking the vernacular, like, you know, oh, you know, we mopped that from the shop and things like that. I had no idea as far back as the 50s. So for me, it was quite a learning a bit of history a little bit, because I guess my history was a little bit limited, which, you know, I love shows like Pose and you know, Paris is Burning, that documentary. I thought that's kind of like how it all started, but I guess it went on a lot further than that. I mean, who knew? I mean, was there a drag scene in the 40s? I don't know.
That blew my mind as well, when you think how far back that was, and also how confident they were, because they were, you know, these were dangerous times for them, because obviously, you know, with police raids and stuff, you know, that's what they wrote about in these letters, and the language that they used again is quite kind of theatrical, the language that they use in those letters, and I found it really charming as well. How they were, you know, expressing what had happened in these clubs.
They loved a good dish, didn't they?
Yeah.
You're so right, you know, because in 1950s New York, maybe there's always been queer people, maybe there's always been drag. It's just whether it's documented. This is the great thing about these stories, right? Which is about exposing history and telling a story. And so, like, you know, in the 1950s, I'm sure the gay scene was pretty difficult to find. If you were, I don't know, it wouldn't be like it is today. And you know, if you were a drag performer, then you were in the margins of society, really. So for these individuals to be friends and to have a network and to have is really warming and lovely. And I love the language. That's one of the things I love about queer culture, is the language and how it carries, you know. And you're right, people talk about mopping and whatnot in the 1950s. It's bonkers, because as you say, you think it comes from 1980s, 1970s, 1980s ball culture. Yeah. So I loved all of that. I thought it was amazing. And, you know, I loved I got a real sense of the characters like Daphne and Billy. You got this real sense of who they were and how they, and you know, and the talking heads and everything just really knitted it together in such a lovely way.
And you talk about Daphne and the language as well. There's one line that jumped out and made both me and my partner Jeremy laugh out loud. It was very next. She was talking about something that had pissed her off at a club. I think it was a police raid, actually, and she was talking about going back and painting more and being more expressive and not giving a shit about anything and just being more dominant in a way. And she just used that line, very next. And I thought that was hilarious. So brilliant.
Yeah, let's bring that one back. Let's start using it. It's so very next.
Did you notice also, and I found this great about this documentary and again really endearing, was that the people that were telling these stories, they had a massive smile on their face. I mean, obviously there was some sadness with certain people, because obviously it was such a strong memory, and when they presented with photographs as well, that was the moment that really broke one guy. I can't remember what his name was, but he was telling the stories about mopping mopping the, was it one of the stores? Actually, it was the Opera House, I think, wasn't it? When they stole
It was the
those
Opera
wigs.
House, and like there was such a
The big
proud moment
heist.
of like,
That's
yeah, there was such a
amazing.
proud moment of not realizing how they'd done it. Like they still don't know how we did it, and it was the bit where they basically gave back like some kind of, they stole all the really good lace front weaves and then gave back all the nylon acrylic ones. I think that's just also completely genius.
So clever. But their faces, they just lit up when they were reminiscing and talking about these stories. And I found that, again, really endearing that they had such happy memories of that time.
There was a couple points that really fascinated me in this documentary. The one point about how the mafia was almost funding the drag scene back in the day too. Like, who would have ever thought that, the drag scene was, promoted and funded by the mafia? That's just crazy for me. But hey, they knew what was making money. And then another thing that fascinated me was how the drag scene in Harlem was completely separate to the drag scene in Manhattan. And then they finally converged and built up their community more. But there was a lot going on in two places that were so close to each other.
And then when you see that footage of the current day Pride festivals as well, and these queens that have been through those times back in the 40s and 50s still doing it today. And again, that's great, because that's like a new generation, and these people are obviously still part of that celebration. And there's something really poignant about that as well. There's something really, really emotive.
It was very touching. And you have to remember that this film was made, I don't know, decades before Stonewall. And Stonewall also united and brought people together, not just in the United States, but globally around, even in the United Kingdom, when you think about the Gay Liberation Front, all that kind of stuff that happened in the late 70s. So it's such an interesting window of time where people were living their lives and having actually a wonderful time. It was scary and dangerous and dark and funded by the mafia and all this stuff. But the stories are so warm, And as you say, when people tell the stories, Phil, they're smiling. They're like regaling these stories. It's really awesome documentary.
I would love to see this develop into a feature film. Actually, the whole wig heist scene from the Metropolitan is so humorous, and I could just picture that in my head. I want to see that be made into a feature film.
Raj, that's the name. It's called Wig Heist.
Wig Heist. Someone call Ryan Murphy right now. Call Ryan Murphy.
We've got it.
We were talking before we started recording about this really moving us. Sean, you cried, if you don't mind me saying, and I did as well. Raj, you didn't, but you obviously felt moved by it. I found it incredibly moving.
Answer here, I'm usually the first one to cry, but no, I was more fascinated than emotional. When there was one guy when he was handed a photo and he was like, "Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit," and you could see the emotions welling up. I almost cried, but I didn't cry. But
for me, the tears came where. Yeah, you're seeing all this narrative on screen with the written letters and it's very stylistic, and then you kind of towards the end, almost in the credits, they then present the letter and the character together.
Yeah.
And as they bring them together, you suddenly go, "That's a real life and that's a real person."
Yeah.
This is all, and that's where it just floored me.
Absolutely.
Because
the reveal of Daphne kind of made me go, like,
I know.
That was.
Really
it
clever.
was there all along. They really had a really clever way of revealing who the characters were. So
I think that's why I love this so much, because documentaries, I'm always fascinated by talking heads documentaries. We've spoken about this before, obviously, if it's an interesting subject. But this was done so brilliantly because it ticked all the boxes for me. It was the way that it was created as well, the animation, the effects with the like the smoke effects. You could just imagine Daphne smoking as she's writing the letter and the smoke is wafting out, and the way that the words are written over the screen, and also the voiceover. I thought it was beautifully done, and it told such a fascinating and often hilarious story as well. And it was an amazing documentary. It's 5 for me. Can't fault it at all.
It's 5 for me.
Wow, I'm going to go with a 4 again. I don't think I could watch it again, but I really enjoyed what I saw.
You're so right there, Raj. I can see this being like a series like Pose or something, where obviously it tells the story, because it's such an important, you know, historical event in itself. It's the start of things, isn't it? Really.
I'm sure Ryan Murphy is casting it as we speak.
So if you want to see our full BFI Flare coverage, click on the playlist. Check out the playlist on screen now, and of course, like and subscribe if you haven't already. Click the notification bell so you know when we're going to publish a new video, and we'll see you on the next one.